right, so I just muted everybody, and you have the ability to unmute yourself, and as do I. So I'm going to unmute Anna, and Anna, ask you to introduce yourself. Anna Koster.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm from the San Jose Friends meeting, and I'm on the nominating committee right now. We're not doing a major reorganization, but our challenge is filling committees, and we're trying to make some minor adjustments so that it's maybe instead of a whole committee, we have a person who's a facilitator or a coordinator. And in another case where we may be splitting a committee and making two out of one. So we've got some things going on in that regard.
Great, thank you. You'll have some good experience for us. So I'm muting Anna. I'm unmuting Arthur Kagaris.
Hi, I'm Arthur from the Orange Grove meeting in Pasadena. Caught me with my mouth full. We've been in the process of trying to figure out how to restructure the hospitality committee because we've been having some burnout with people in that. And thank you, Mary, for your feedback on that. We've been talking to a lot of different meetings trying to find out how other people manage that. So we're having a meeting next week to discuss some options for us.
Great, thank you. Going down the list here, I'm unmuting Ellie. So Ellie, would you share with us?
Yes, hi, I'm Ellie Schachter, member of La Jolla meeting, but I've been up in Ukiah for the last 2 years and in the Ukiah worship group. And I don't think we're discussing much of these issues at all.
Okay, thank you. You'll get your chance, I'm sure. Okay, Eric Maya-Joy.
I'm with Olympia meeting, which seems to be pretty healthy and has pretty full committees, and things seem to be working well that way. I was just recently at a coordinating committee meeting for the yearly meeting, and at the yearly meeting level, there is a tremendous challenge in getting the committees full, and it's not clear where that's going to lead at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Georgia Daniels.
Hi, I'm a member of the Orange Grove meeting, and we are, as Arthur mentioned, looking at restructuring maybe fellowship and pastoral care and worship and ministry might join together. So we've got lots to do and no clear direction yet.
Okay, thank you.
Communication, representation to the community. For each particular area, they work to find one volunteer coordinator. Then when a project comes up, they can tap into those volunteers. The high touch committees, such as our ministry and oversight committee, adult religious education, have maintained a standard committee structure. I also serve on our yearly meetings committee on the discipline.
Oh, I think we've got Hillary joining us. Is that right? Are you? Thank you, Jay.
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yep, you got it.
Hillary Burwell, Sacramento Friends meeting. We're not doing any major restructuring. We have had a threshing session on doing co-clerking, so we've looked into that a little bit. So, but it was mixed response on that, so that's something we're coming back to. So, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm unmuting Julie Guy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Guy. Mary Klein, thank you for your work on Western Friend. I am a member of Tempe Friends meeting in Tempe, Arizona. We just had a meeting with attention to business on Sunday where our nomination slate was presented, and sadly, no one feels led to come forward and work on the children's religious education committee. We also have, to give you a better idea or a more of a detailed picture, the meeting is comprised of 50 or so individuals, and we have so many committees and so many tasks that need to be done in our Blue Book that our nominating committee sadly cannot fill all the positions. To compound issues, we have an aging membership. I would say more than half of our members are retirement age, and not very many college age who are active within our community.
Okay, well, I'm sure others, that'll sound familiar. Thank you. Catherine Youngmeister, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So I am formerly from Strawberry Creek meeting and now a member of Santa Fe monthly meeting, where I'm clerk of the meeting, having been there for only 1 year. We all know how that happens. Everybody else says no, and people become very creative. So I saw a major committee restructuring at Strawberry Creek. I hear some of the same threads from other people that I see in the Santa Fe meeting. They have a system. I was used to having complete committees named for all committees by the nominating committee. At Santa Fe, the officers and ministry and council are named in full, and then beyond that, conveners are sought for the other standing committees. For instance, Adult Ed didn't have a convener this year, and right now there are 3 people plus the clerk of the meeting on ministry and council, which is a severe underpopulation of that committee. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, people show up for ad hoc committees, and even where there isn't an ad hoc committee, they do things that need to be done. And so, you know, there's a problem and there isn't. There are things that aren't populated and aren't, you know, we don't know who's going to do them, and then people step up and do them. Like we have no one to do food for meeting for business, before meeting for business, which comes at, you know, 12:30 or something. And people bring food though, so that there'll be food, so that people won't go to meeting for business hungry. It's just because it's needed. So, yeah.
Great. Good model. Okay, so I am unmuting Michael.
I'm Michael Dickey from Pullman Moscow monthly meeting, and I'm clerk of the Ministry and Oversight. And we have no committees going on, but we are presently working on getting our nomination committee together to nominate officers for different parts of our meeting. We're a very small, aging meeting. Over half of the meeting is well over retirement age. So we have very few people that are able to fulfill the positions we need to complete our meeting by way of clerks and other things. We have a few new attendees that come whenever they can, and one family has 3 kids, 2 little children and a baby. They enjoy coming to meet us at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, which we were having our meetings over at the Campus Christian Center in Moscow, Idaho, until we decided we needed to find another place to be. The rent was was okay, but having accessibility for people who need to use the bathroom was very difficult because some people had to walk upstairs or had to park on the street in a different place.
Great. So Michael, I think I want to save some of the detail for when we get to the queries. So it sounds like you guys are really being creative in, you know, confronting these challenges that we all face. So hold those thoughts. I want to kind of just make sure everybody's microphones are working and so that we can all hear each other's names and voices. So thank you. I'm going to mute Nico and unmute Promise. So Promise, would you introduce yourself to us?
Yes, my name is Promise Hartner, and I'm an active attender at Eugene Friends Meeting of the last 3 years. I remain a member of Stillwater Friends Meeting in Ohio, Conservative Friends. And Eugene Friends Meeting, this is our second year of having 3 co-clerks. So I know they did a lot of work, mostly before I came, to reorganize and have co-clerks. And we just had a threshing session on Sunday to start the process of talking about reorganization of our committees, trying to define our needs and think about new ways that we can meet them. So we're just at the beginning of that process.
Great, thank you. So let's see, I'm gonna just keep going down and see who else we can, see if they can introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to the questions. So Sandy Baumler, I've got you unmuted. Are you able to introduce yourself?
So my intro is just, I'm from Missoula Meeting. We have a very aging and shrinking meeting, 10 to 15 people on Sunday. And we're just looking for ideas on being creative about how we do all the things we want to do with few people.
Great. Okay, thank you. Good to see you. Okay, Sharon, I've got you unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, there you are.
Hooray. Okay, so I'm also from Orange Grove Meeting. And as a number of people have said, we're working on combining worship and ministry and pastoral care. We also were not able to find people to serve on children's education. And so we changed, kind of on the fly, we changed the structure of children's education. And we're basically struggling with the same issues that a number of people have mentioned of not having people to serve and not knowing how to pare down.
Okay, well said. Okay, so Shelley, you should be able to join us, I hope.
Hi, I'm Shelley Tannenbaum from Strawberry Creek Meeting. Is that coming through?
Yep.
Good, okay. And as Catherine said, we did go through some of this a few years ago, and we did it a few years prior to that. It seems like every 5 years or so, some kind of reevaluation is needed. We're having an interesting issue of an influx of children and needing to ramp up our first day program. So, but not that many people want to be part of it. So I would say ditto, ditto, ditto to almost everything everyone has said. I'm also here as the General Secretary for Quaker Earth Care Witness, which is a national organization where we have similar issues of how to staff committees and how to keep them lively and how to keep them, and with the added problem of how to keep them going in between sessions, since we only meet twice a year.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, muting Shelley, unmuting Tally.
Hi. Yes, do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm from Palo Alto Meeting along with Mary. And as you know, if you've read her notes, we are going through restructuring, and we finally passed a minute with shrinking from about 16 committees to 6. And now we're beginning the work of trying to figure out what those committees are actually going to do and who's going to staff what. So problems sound very familiar, and I'll be interested to hear more.
Great. Thank you, Tally. Muting Tally, unmuting Ted.
Well, I haven't tried this microphone before. How's it working?
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also from Missoula Meeting, across town from Sandy Bemler. Sandy did a pretty good job of outlining our issue of graying population and not many young people filling in behind. I might mention that we have some committees that have devolved to a single person, and in some instances that's worked well. But in one or two other instances, an individual has kind of taken off on a mission that really needed some consultation. And other people in the meeting kind of got nervous when they found out where that individual was heading. So we need some kind of keeping in contact process for people who are functioning as committees of one.
Great. Good new point. So I'm going to go back. Bonnie Fraser joined us after I started down the list here. So Bonnie, I've just unmuted you.
Hi, Mary. Good to see you.
Great. Yes.
I have Julie Guy also spoke of our meeting. I'm the clerk of the nominating committee at the present, and so we're having an all-member drive to get every member of the meeting to teach children religious ed for 1 month, with some meetings pre-set up for the little kids and more room for the older kids. And we're going to get very flexible on what kind of lessons they need, from depending on what kind of things that people think they can offer. I spent some time in Burlington Friends Meeting in Vermont, and they are doing a co-clerk right now very successfully. When I was there, I'm recalling that there were times when the committees were asked to do adult religious ed, which we've also had some trouble staffing. I mean, we've got a couple of people, but we wanted more. And so it's one of the things that as we start meeting this week also, or next Monday, we're threshing on what we might do. And then the whole meeting will come together. So we're working on how can we be vital. Oh, one other piece. One of the older members came to me and said, you know, the reason we split out ministry and worship and counsel and oversight, we used to have 5-hour meetings. So there's your 2 cents worth from Nancy Dolphin.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna, wait, where are you there? Okay, I'm muting Bonnie. I don't remember seeing Jana Ostrom's name before, so I'm unmuting Jana. I think that's the last person I don't think I've tried yet. Jana, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm here from University Friends Meeting in Seattle, Washington, and I am the clerk of Care and Counsel, which is what we used to call oversight.
Okay, great. Oh, sorry.
Our meeting is having trouble filling positions. I am going off this committee. I'm at the end of my term limit. The clerk of worship and ministry is also going off that committee. She's at the end of her term limit. And at this point, we don't have clerks for those 2 committees. I would say that there's about 4 or 5 people on each of those committees. We have talked a little bit about combining them, but haven't seriously decided to do that yet.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's try proceeding this way. That I'm going to show the queries in a moment. In fact, I'll just do that now. So I hope what you're seeing is the 2 queries that or sets of queries, clouds of inquiry, I called them. And we're at 7 o'clock now. I would like us to end at 8. And we have not worshiped at the beginning, and I'm just going to say let's forge ahead and save some time at the end, though, to worship together before we leave. So I'm going to keep an eye on the clock, and at about I don't know, a little bit before 7:30, I'll ask us to switch from the first kind of set of questions to the second. So in our meeting in Palo Alto, we found we needed to step back a little bit and think about what we were together for before we could really think about how to work together. So we really kind of did a values clarification kind of set of conversations. So I thought I would be interested to hear from others of you how you see those conversations in your meeting and you know, bearing fruit, I guess, or those practices in your meeting. So what practices in your meeting help improve the sense of cohesiveness in your meeting, sense of common purpose, sense of joy in being together? Okay, so Sharon, you raised your hand.
Yeah, am I unmuted?
You are.
Oh, okay. I think the thing that most helps us know why we're a community, why we want to be a community, is when we do things that are outside. I hate to say this, outside of meeting. We have a pool party just about every year, and it's great. It's people just sitting around and talking about whatever. People show up who never come to meeting. People who would never go to a business meeting go to the pool party. We also have a group that gets together on a monthly basis and does crafts. They each bring their own crafts, and it's not like an organized session. It's just people sitting around and knitting or drawing or doing whatever they do. I've never actually gone because I live too far away, but people really love that. So it's when we get together socially, I think, that really improves our sense of being a community.
Hang on just a second. There we go. So Jay.
We painted the meeting house together. It needs a new roof too, but we don't plan to do that together. Painting together really worked well for us.
Thank you. And Catherine?
Yeah, we had an ad hoc adult ed committee that came together in the following Intermountain Yearly Meetings annual session, which had been very inspiring. And that group of people felt that, and I mostly listened because I was new, felt that what was really important was for the meeting to have a retreat. And we chose to have a one-day in-town retreat focused on worship. And it was a day of worship sharing in the whole group, in small groups, in dyads. We had lunch together. And it was a day full of love, and that has spilled out over the subsequent months. And people, when we asked in the evaluation what people wanted, one of the things that we hadn't put in there was very open-ended. And one of the things people said was, another retreat just like this. So we may do that next fall.
Great. Thank you. So Ted.
Yes, we're actually trying to get a retreat organized and trying to find a time when it's not conflicting with other events that are coming up as being a challenge. But it's been my experience over the years that we seem to attract two distinctly different types of newcomers, and they've got their domains. One is the newcomer who's attracted to the social activity that Quakers tend to engage in. And, like after 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq, our meeting numbers swelled tremendously. And many of them kind of drifted away over the course of several years. But the Friends meeting in Missoula was a very prominent presence. At the time, the Iraq invasion was getting underway, and people kind of looked to us as being a beacon in that period. But I think we lost many of them because they didn't have the spiritual connection. And then there's the flip side of that. There are the people for whom meeting for worship is what it is. And they join us in that and they revel in it. But getting them to stick around for social activities and community activities is the challenge. And so trying to entice them to stick around long enough to get better acquainted and familiar with the other circles in which we move is something of a challenge, and a pretty modest fraction is able to start in one domain and join the other.
Anna?
Hi. Hearing other people speak remind me of what we're doing that works and is good. We actually have been really blessed with having some younger people come to us. And we haven't lost all of them. As with many meetings, people come and they drift away. But some have stuck around, so that's great. We're having a retreat actually this Saturday. We generally have a retreat every year. We were alternating one on our property one year, and then the next year at Ben Lomond Quaker Center. This year was an away from or at home retreat, and we're having the Ben Lomond Quaker Center Quaker Center on the Road program, which also goes by something about radical Quakerism, from roots to shoots to fruits. And that's available to any meetings that want to have them come. There is a sliding scale fee, and be more appropriate to local Quakers meetings. But that's always helpful for us. We had a major discussion about something. I can't even remember what, I'm losing my mind, about something, and it was very well attended. But we had a threshing session, but we had another discussion that drew a lot of people, and we're having trouble filling committees, but people are stepping up. We have not had anyone officially on our hospitality committee for a year, but we've had I guess what somebody called a volunteer coordinator, who's not even on the list and getting credit that way. But we have food all the time. Sometimes we have more food on non-potluck Sundays than we do on potluck Sundays. And we've been very fortunate. People have just, as somebody said, Catherine Youngmeister said in the Santa Fe meeting, people just make things happen. So I don't know if that's a best practice, not having people on a committee, but yet being able to offer hospitality. But it's working for us, and we're looking ahead to make some changes and see if we can adopt some other best practices.
So, Ellie?
Hi, yes. I'm just thinking, first of all, about my local worship group, which is really very small, but people do go out to lunch after each meal, and there's conversation there. So we get to know one another. But one of our activities is preparing sandwiches for the homeless people. And we get together where there's someone coordinates the whole thing on a citywide basis. And we prepare lunches for maybe 100 every 2 or 3 months. So that's an extra activity, and we get together on Saturdays. And so to do that, and then to hand out the food. in terms of when we were at La Jolla, and going way back for many years, there'd be a couple maybe in charge of food, and they plead for people to volunteer and bring food, and none of it worked. And finally, after a couple of years, we had nobody on the food committee. And then people started bringing food with no planning. And that's gone on for years now. And it works very well. And people are just get together and they talk and they choose what tables they're going to sit at. And you get to know a whole bunch of people. So that, I think, really built community. But we had Quaker 8s. Every year we would try to have Quaker 8s for people, whoever felt like offering a small gathering would choose the topic, they put the sheets of paper on a big table, and people would sign up. And either it would be hosted at a particular time, or the committee, the person who signs up first is the clerk, and it would go on for 8 weeks or forever, practically, for a year or so, depending on the topic. There's a group that makes blankets to send into a chemotherapy unit at a hospital. And that has gone on for quite a few years. People gathering to have a float at the LGBT parade was always a big gatherer. Work day to clean up the meeting house worked. There's a group that sings together every, I think just once a month now before meeting for worship, but it used to be every single Sunday. So there's a singing and then a Labor Day retreat, which people really, it's clearly a spiritual life retreat, and that works well. And this is all in addition to quarterly meetings and that kind of thing. So I think they all contributed to building community in various ways. And that's it.
Great, that's a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Shelley.
Yeah, I guess I want to say something that seems really obvious. The quality of worship on first day is an incredible way to draw together cohesiveness. And if the quality isn't very good, people will begin to drift away. I've also found worship sharing, either in retreats or in finding other ways to do more worship sharing in your meeting is extremely valuable, and you get to a very deep place very quickly and pulls together the community in amazing ways.
Okay, Jana, I think I really did unmute you.
We have a fairly active adult religious education group. And we had not done any kind of explanation. We call it Quakerism 101, basic Quakerism. We had not offered anything like that for a number of years. And so in the month of February, the folks who are on the committee doing adult religious education worked with our worship and ministry group and talked each week about preparation for meeting, going into meeting, what happened, what people do during meeting for worship, how they respond to other people's messages. And over again, people said they wanted to do more of this, that it was really important to them to hear what other people were doing and to learn from each other. It was quite remarkable. And we are continuing with that. We'll see what happens with it. But I think it surprised all of us, the depth of how much people wanted it and how well it was responded to.
Were people from kind of across the board of length of participation in your meeting represented, or was it mostly newcomers?
Of the people who were in the audience, so the presenters were people who were experienced friends, and the audience was a range of people. It was across the board.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Promise, you are unmuted.
This may be a little bit of a digression because it's about what may contribute to a lack of cohesiveness, but I'm led to speak about having multiple meetings for worship or multiple times for worship on a first day. The comments about worship as being the foundation for the cohesiveness of the meeting really resonates with me. And there's 2 meetings at Eugene Friends meeting, and 9 o'clock and an 11 o'clock. And it feels, I've just observed that and had some felt division and personal discomfort with these 2 separate groups. And that I don't even know how long that's been around. And it may not be relevant to this discussion, but maybe if others might want to talk about that or have that experience in their own meeting, I would like to talk about it at some point.
Great, thank you. So there's a question in the room of meetings that have separate groups worshiping apart from each other. If there's any experiences that friends could share about that, those would be welcome. I'm also interested, based on the comments about the Quaker 101 and the Quaker Center on the Road, those sort of kind of explicit, intentional, structured conversations about, what does it mean to be a Quaker, or what does it mean for us to be Quakers together? I'm interested in people's reactions to, I don't know, the importance of those kinds of conversations, the success, if that's, that seems like kind of a weird word to use, but how productive have you felt those kinds of conversations have been to the life of your meeting? So that's another question that I've got as kind of a follow-up from what friends have shared. So, so I'm going to unmute Ted and then Jana. So Ted, go ahead.
Thank you. We've had some formal Quaker 101 sessions in our Quaker Ed or first day school classes, and our unfortunate experience was that they tended to be attended by longtime meeting members. They didn't seem to be attracting the newcomers. The people who would show up for a meeting for worship at 11 and were new to the meeting were not the ones who were coming to Quaker Ed sessions. And we're not sure how to break that ice, but they don't seem to have the concept of showing up earlier than at the start of meeting for worship. And that's just been a big rock we've been rolling uphill for a long time.
Jana?
One of the things I mentioned that this was something we'd been doing adult religious ed, and the people who worked on it made a lot of effort to reach out to people. They called people individually and invited them to come, people who were relatively new or people who used to come to meeting and hadn't been there for a while. And I think that really did, they put a lot of work. There were signs on the meeting house doors. This was a lot more effort than we'd ever put into it. And one of the things that I was struck by was there was a woman who had ministered a number of times. And I, among others, had wondered whether she understood what Quakers might think of as what leads one to rise and speak in meeting. And she listened to a longtime friend saying that she usually during meeting upheld the meeting during worship, and that she had maybe spoken 3 times in the last 20 years. And this was a real surprise to the person who had spoken. She said, I've spoken more than 3 times in the last couple of months. And I think it was something that she thought, oh, there's something different about all of this that I just did not realize. So that, we're waiting to see how this changes our meeting for worship, which is a large one and has quite a lot of speaking, some of which can feel very gathered and some of which isn't.
Okay, Arthur, you are unmuted.
Thank you. One thing I've personally found is that a lot of the activities people have been discussing are kind of social community activities, and I think those have been invaluable in letting me get to know members of our community better. But as far as the shared values and cohesiveness, I kind of don't get a chance to see that stuff in action until we're at activities where we're kind of pursuing those goals. And one that came to mind was when an attender at our meeting had been arrested and needed some support in her court hearings, and a handful of us met with her and supported her there. And it let me get to know other members of our community and kind of see them in action. And I also find that attendance at yearly meeting lets me see a completely different side of a lot of our members, because in the course of discussion at plenaries or different workshops that people are involved in, I kind of see how the Quaker process works in a broader context and how it plays out in some people's lives, because that doesn't always get discussed during worship or at fellowship.
I'm going to put up the second set of queries for us to look at, and I will put them in the chat window also. So, so going from the more general to the more specific, and we can continue to speak more generally. And more specifically, in our Quaker meetings, how do we determine who decides what? How do we respect the hard work of others and avoid reinventing the wheel? How do we distinguish revelation from nitpicking? What committees and officers do we really need? Kind of questions of authority. How do we get on the same page about that? And I'll put this in the chat window also. All right, so I will wait for hands. Should I put those back up for?
I'm somewhat of a radical on who decides what. I figure if 2 or 3 friends are gathered in good faith, I trust them to make a decision on a particular matter that they has been committed to them. Quaker meetings don't need to be democratic, and I think that democratic notions impede us in many cases. so that I think it's just fine for a meeting to delegate a decision to a committee on something that might ordinarily, and does in most meetings, come before the whole meeting for business.
So Anna.
Well, I've been in the San Jose meeting for almost, 45 or a lot of years, many decades. And I've seen a change in that meeting. I visited other meetings as well. And I do know that there's been a huge shift over about, from earlier to now. In the past, there was a lot of second guessing of committee work. I don't know if people didn't trust others or what happened, but there's been a huge change, and our business meeting generally just lets the committees do their work, and there's a line about what the business meeting needs to decide. Now, how we got there, I think took a lot of things. I'm not sure quite what all went into that, because it was a long process, but it works a lot better. We do have some decisions, of course, the whole business meeting makes, and sometimes we'll just ask the committee to make a decision, to research something to decide. We are looking at, we have the oldest meeting house perhaps west of the Rockies, certainly in California, and needless to say, it's not ADA compliant. And we also own the house next door, which is not ADA compliant. And we're looking at doing some work that will make it more accessible. I have one person who's very dedicated to coming to meetings. She's in a wheelchair, and it's not easy for her. But we're looking at making major changes, and that's been a problem. Well, it's a big project. I won't say it's a problem. It's just we have a lot of work to do to make those major decisions, because a lot of money is involved. And of course, there was a little confusion because the committee that was doing this work thought they had an okay to go ahead and do whatever they decided, and that certain things had been approved. And we had to meet with the clerk of that committee and explain that just because they report on something in business meeting and say they thought this and they thought that and they wanted to do this and that and the other, didn't mean that the meeting for business approved it, and it needed to be approved before any course of action went forward. And we showed exactly in the minutes what had been approved. And I think that will help. And we're, so we are still working on all of this, but it's not as contentious as it had been in decades past.
You said you didn't really remember, how the change happened over enough time that it doesn't stand out clearly in your mind. I'm wondering if you do have a sense, though, of your memory. Was there a kind of an intention about making the change, or was it more of an organic shift?
Well, I think the big change really came about when there was a misconception in the meeting about what unity was, and certain people took it upon themselves to stand in the way of a lot of decisions in committee and in business meeting. And I think a lot of resentment had built up, and it was not a good way to function. There was a big blow up in our meeting, in business meeting, around a couple individuals. And it was I happened to have been clerk then. And I remember it was difficult. But we got help from Quarterly Meeting, M&O, and it was pointed out about the difference between unity and unanimity, etc., and that we didn't need to have everyone in agreement. We just need to listen and be sensitive to everyone. And of course, we didn't just barge ahead. We labored with people, but some people were not to be labored with. And so we learned to move forward and not let these people impede us. And then that it really relieves so much tension in meeting. I think that was it. I had such difficulties in my time as clerk. I stepped away from meeting, from monthly meeting for a while, and I was more involved in Quarterly Meeting and other Quaker activities. And then when I came back, I saw that the practice had changed in making decisions, and the clerk recognizing unity in business meeting and sometimes going ahead with over the objections of individual one or maybe two people, generally just one. I think that did a whole lot to heal our meeting.
Thank you for that follow-up. So Ted.
Yes. On financial affairs, which are sometimes contentious, we give our committees and individuals tasked with, building maintenance, license to operate, within modest amounts without coming to business meeting for approval. We decided some number of years ago that in dealing with maintenance on the meeting house or the rental house that we own next door, people overseeing that could spend $100 without it becoming a discussion for business meeting. That larger amounts we felt took sufficient chunks out of the budget or risked going over the budget that we felt it needed to be a business meeting decision, but we didn't want modest maintenance issues to be held up for that, or emergencies to be put off. So we've given individuals in those realms license to proceed, given some judgment about whether there's an urgency or if there's time to have business meeting approved. We also took a lesson from North Pacific Yearly Meetings Executive Committee and decided that if there was an apparent need for a decision, especially financial, that couldn't wait until the next business meeting, that collective decision of the meeting clerk, the treasurer, and the the clerk of ministry and oversight collectively could decide if something rose to the occasion of needing immediate resolution. So that was our solution for dealing with things that couldn't wait for the next business meeting to come around. Outside of that, we tend to give committees license to spend funds within their budgets and not bring something to business meeting unless it looks like it will have an impact on the entire meeting or is a reflection on the meeting, and then we ask for that to be brought forward.
So promise?
Sure. Promise, Eugene Friends Meeting. I think working with a written job description is really has really been important for me as a member of the nurturing committee, which is maybe called care and counsel in your meetings. And this has been, the last 2 years have been my first experience with the business and care of the meeting. So working on that, looking through that job description and talking about each of them and whether we had actually, after a year, had we actually done that and how, was a really good process. And back to the it helped me to feel cohesive as a committee, that we were because for the first year we didn't look, I hadn't seen the job description. And it's one of the things I'm curious about. I looked at the documents from Palo Alto meeting and your process, and shared that with some other friends in the meeting. And so the question that we have is, I think you're moving into the next step of creating the responsibilities of those streamlined committees. So we're just very curious about how the responsibilities will be simplified, since there will be fewer committees and fewer people working on those committees. And this idea of doing less, but still meeting the needs is, I think, a really spiritual idea that we need to do less and yet trust that everything will be cared for. And that really means being in that space. I mean, being back to the worship that we have together, or, it's a spirit-led project. So thank you for sharing those. And if anyone from that meeting would like to share any more about how you're going to streamline those responsibilities, that would be really helpful, I think.
Well, coincidentally or not, Tally, who's from Palo Alto meeting, had also just raised her hand. So I'm going to unmute Tally and mute you, partner. And so Tally, go ahead.
Hi. Well, I will tell you that is still very much a work in progress. We have not yet determined how we're going to decide what those responsibilities will look like and who will hold what. So be patient. We expect this, we kind of agreed that we're going to take at least 3 years to try this structure out and see where we end up as we move through it and what happens. But I'm clerk of nominating, and today we said, well, how are we going to handle new descriptions for committees? And then we veered off to the fact that we still don't have a clerk for next year, and decided we put that question aside for another couple of weeks. So no answer on that one. But the other thing that struck me was when Anna was speaking about not understanding unity. I think that's a challenge that many of us may be facing, in that, especially as there's been this rise in the secular world in America of the use of the word consensus, that many people seem to think that unity and consensus are the same thing. And we had that problem pretty extensively a while ago in our meeting, and we actually did a 3-session program on what was unity. And we had our, at that time, called Oversight, is now called Care and Concerns, and is soon to become Ministry and Council Committee, arranged for speakers from different meetings to come and guide us in a 3-part exercise. And that was probably about 8 or 10 years ago, Mary, you may remember.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped somewhat. Our budgets we have a fairly extensive budget, and in each area committee that needs a budget has one, and they are encouraged to use it. And that seems to work pretty well, without them having to come for approval constantly. When it doesn't work is if there's a committee that comes very strongly wanting a major change in the amount of money they're given, or what they want meeting to do with the money that's in the budget. And that has created conflict in the past. So we changed, what we did at that point was we changed how it was determined, where it was regarding donations. And we made some shifts in who made the decisions about donations and how they were reported. And that smoothed that over more than it had been. I think where we have trouble deciding who has responsibility and who can speak is when someone wishes to speak publicly, or for us to sign on to a message or to a petition as a meeting rather than as individuals. And that's still something that I would say I see as often raising contention, and to the extent that there's often those things have deadlines. You need to get this, if you're going to speak, you need to speak in a short amount of time. And Palo Alto likes to think about things, sometimes longer than they probably need to be thought about. So we're off on a new adventure regarding our committees, and we'll keep you all updated through Mary as to what goes on. That's it.
Jay.
I'm wondering, from friends in Palo Alto, are many friends in your meeting ready to leave things that the meeting has traditionally done behind? Are you ready to lay down functions, not just committees, but leave some things undone?
We'll find out. There are some people who are quite ready to do that, and there are some people who are quite concerned about changes in the structure. So, as I said, the adventure is really just beginning. So we're just going to have to see how things go. Can't answer that question with a...
Thank you.
We'll let you know.
Okay, so Sharon.
Well, I'm wondering what kinds of things is Palo Alto or any other meeting that's going through similar stuff, what kinds of things are you even thinking about letting go? I know when we look at lists of, job responsibilities of various committees, and every individual can edit out what they think can be let go of, but to come to any sort of general sense of what can be let go of, we haven't gone through this exercise at Orange Grove, but I know when we tried to go through it in Pacific Yearly Meeting, it didn't go anywhere. Everybody thought that what they were doing was absolutely essential, and so we didn't let go of anything.
Go ahead, Tally.
I think, Mary, you've shared some of the part of the tune-up, or whatever we call it, vitality rejuvenation that we did in the fall. And out of that, we kind of so we looked at what is it that we care about Palo Alto Friends Meeting in a variety of different steps. This just didn't happen in one day, I will assure you. And it kind of came down to that the thing that was really all important to us was worship and community, which includes outreach, and then less so, but still present, was activism in the world in some form. So I think those are going to be the guiding principles that we will use in looking at what do we let go. And I think we're going to see what can we do for this first year. How does it work? And then at the end of that year, say, okay, can we do more? Many of the things that you all are talking about with like hospitality, that we have a huge hospitality committee right now. We have 13 people on hospitality. That drains a lot of people. And so we may become if you want food, you better bring it type of hospitality, and see if that frees people to do more in the things that probably would generate closer senses of ties and better support worship and better attract and help some of those people who find us find a way to be able to stay. One of the reasons we knew that it was time to do things, there was one of the members of meeting who has a hard time with change. And I was in conversation with him, and he said, I'm just actually sitting here thinking of how many ad hoc committees we have had in the last 2 or 3 years. So obviously something about our current committee structure is not working, because we're just using ad hoc committees all the time, which people want to work on. I heard someone else say that earlier. So I think that one of the things we're hoping is that there's more flexibility in what committees do, rather than being stuck with a committee description that they feel they have to fulfill. We'll see.
So I'm going to unmute Ellie and then Anna. So Ellie, go ahead. There you are.
Oh, okay.
I want to really emphasize some things that have been said, because some of us have been doing a lot of thinking about Quakerism historically and what Quakerism can mean in the world for the 21st century. What practices do we have that are essential if we're going to remain Quakers and be in the world, and what practices need to be dropped or expanded or developed in a new way? What is the face? What is the voice of Quakerism for the 21st century? And that can take a lot of time. And I feel we cannot assume that we will do the same things now as we did in the 1600s or the 1800s. So that's one thing. And another thing that was said here is the importance of reaching out. And I think we're defining this generally much too narrowly. We're good at saying hello when a stranger walks in, and maybe we even get their name and telephone number, but only as we are known do we become a part of a group. So, I heard about a study some years ago which said when people go to a new church, a new group, if they don't really connect or make some friends in some way in the first 3 weeks, it's not worth it to them, and they don't come back. And the spiritual message is really important, but how do we embody and extend this spirituality in the way we reach out? I really believe that we need to call these people. We need to help them find a way to connect with us, because otherwise they're not going to know what to do in meeting for worship, perhaps. So anyway, this reaching out. Now, some groups even appoint a buddy, or whatever term you want to call. There are groups that even match up people that they know in the meeting with how they think, the kind of relationship the new person who's shown up is seeking, and then try to find a person who can talk in those terms. But the other part of this, I think, is the importance of our nominating committee. So often we get desperate to fill a post, and assuming that we're going more and more deeply into worship so that the meeting for worship itself has depth, and assuming that we're really reaching out and getting to know people who show up. And I know how important this was for me in going to La Jolla. There were several people who really reached out to me and invited me to go for walks or have lunch with them or dinner at home in the fireside. Anyway, that's important. But nominating committee, I see as a long-term process of 3, 4, 5 years, really getting to know the person who has appeared, what committees might work best for them at the beginning, but as a spiritual unfolding that goes on over the years. This person has a lot to learn, maybe something to think about this, but I see the qualities of a person being on finance or ministry or worship, that kind of thing. So I want to emphasize all 3 of those things. What is essential in Quakerism now, what perhaps we could let go of, how we genuinely welcome people into a meeting, and the very important role of nominating committee over the years to help a person unfold to their in the highest best way that we can see that they may to open up. So that's all I would say here.
That's wonderful. I really appreciate a kind of overview sort of statement as we approach the end of our time together. We've got one more hand, so I want to hear from Anna, and then maybe friends would be willing to linger on just for a few minutes past the hour to worship. Oh, and Eric Majoy also has a comment, so let's keep these brief. Anna?
Well, actually, I'll pass. It's not so relevant. I was just going to refer to a time in my meetings past when we went down to two committees, an inward focused committee and an outward focused committee, and it didn't really work. It was only 1 year. So I won't belabor that.
All right, thank you. And last word from Eric Majoy.
Most of what we've been talking about here this evening, we're talking about the needs and the adjustments that need to be made in the decline of people to do things and what we'd like to be doing. I think that we need to step back, and I'd love to see one of these sessions like this that looked at it, questions like why the decline and what do we do about it. It's very frustrating for me after and continuing work with Indigenous people, seeing things that the world so sorely needs today. And that we as friends have experience in some of these areas. I think there are some major pieces of continuing revelation that we have to recognize and be looking for significant change. I appreciated some of the things that Ellie brought up because that was starting to get in this area. I've heard recently from a historian of Quakerism that when Friends first emerged and the seeker things were going on and all of those sorts of things, that they were taking a very serious look at what was going on with society and what was needed to deal with those things and come back to some sort of healthy center. And that what came out of that ended up manifesting in what became the Society of Friends. And so I think taking a step back to look at why the decline, what's going on in the world today, what's needed, and how do we go about getting there would be a wonderful session to be having. And thank you for the work that you're doing in bringing these together.
Thank you. Let's worship together for just a couple minutes.